The bullet that killed Yuna came from Janet's gun. At least, that's what the evidence would show. That's what the surveillance cameras captured in perfect high-definition clarity. That's what 12 different angles of security footage would tell the Seoul police, the international investigators, and anyone else who cared to look. Nigerian doctor shoots Korean woman in cold blood atop Namsan Tower. Self-defense maybe. Murder probably. The truth? Infinitely more complicated. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because the real story, the one that would break the internet and destroy lives and rewrite everything anyone thought they knew about Park Min-ho's empire, began 3 hours before that bullet was fired. It began in a place Janet never knew existed. It began in the room beneath their bedroom. Janet stood in what could only be described as a command center pulled from a spy thriller. The space was massive, carved from the foundation of their mansion like a secret beating heart. Walls of monitors displayed live feeds from across Seoul. Weapons lined one wall in climate-controlled cases. A central holographic table projected real-time tactical data that looked like something out of a science fiction film. And in the center of it all, looking somehow smaller and more human than she'd ever seen him, stood Min-ho. "How long has this been here?" Janet asked, her voice echoing in the sterile space. She was still processing the hidden elevator behind their closet, the biometric scanner that had read Min-ho's palm and retina, the descent into a world she'd lived above for 3 years without knowing. "Since before I married you," Min-ho said quietly, his tattooed fingers dancing across holographic controls, pulling up files and images with practiced ease. "This is the real headquarters of my operation. The office downtown, the legitimate businesses, the public face, all of it is theatre. This is where the actual work happens." He pulled up an image that made Janet's breath catch. Yuna. But not the scarred, rage-filled woman from the video. This was Yuna from 5 years ago, smiling, beautiful, unmarked by trauma, standing beside a man Janet didn't recognize, an older man in an expensive suit with cold, calculating eyes. "His name is Choi Jin-sang," Min-ho said, his voice dropping to something dangerous and cold. "He's the real power behind half the criminal enterprises in Asia, Yuna's father." The words hit Janet like a physical blow. Her father. "You were dating the daughter of a crime lord." "I didn't know," Min-ho said, and the pain in his voice was raw and real. That was the point. She was planted in my life at 23, trained since childhood to be the perfect infiltrator. Smart, charming, vulnerable enough to make me want to protect her. We dated for 2 years. I told her everything. My operations, my safe houses, my contacts. I trusted her completely. He pulled up another image. Yuna, tied to a chair, beaten, the beginning of her scar visible on her face. Then her father decided it was time to use the information she'd gathered. He staged her kidnapping, tortured her just enough to make it convincing, and sent me videos of her screaming my name. He demanded I dismantle my operation and hand over control of Seoul's underworld. "But you didn't," Janet said, understanding dawning. "I couldn't," Min-ho replied, his fists clenching. "If I gave him Seoul, thousands would suffer. Human trafficking, child exploitation, the worst humanity has to offer. That's what Choi Jin-sang's empire trades in. So I made a choice. I let her die. Or so I thought." He pulled up the final image. A body bag. Autopsy reports. DNA confirmation. "I identified her body myself, Janet. I watched them close the casket. I stood at her funeral and mourned the woman I'd sacrificed for the greater good. And I've been living with that guilt for 3 years." "But she's alive," Janet said, which means everything I saw, everything I buried was staged," Min-ho finished. "The body was someone else. The DNA was falsified. Yuna's father faked her death to break me psychologically while keeping his most valuable asset alive. And for 3 years, she's been building an army of my enemies, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." Janet moved closer to the holographic display, studying Yuna's face. "Why now?" Why wait 3 years? Because 3 years ago I was already broken, Minho said. I was guilt-ridden, paranoid, too damaged to be a real threat. But then I met you. And slowly, painfully, I started healing. I started hoping again. And that... He looked at Janet with devastating clarity. That made me dangerous again. A broken man is easy to control. A man with something to live for. That's a threat worth eliminating. Before Janet could respond, one of the monitors flared red. An alert. Minho's fingers flew across the controls, pulling up new footage. Janet's heart stopped. It was her mother's house in Lagos. Live feed. And surrounding it were at least 20 armed men. No, Janet whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. You said they were safe. You said... They were safe, Minho interrupted, already pulling up communications channels. This just happened, within the last 60 seconds. He was speaking rapid Korean into a headset, issuing orders with lethal efficiency. I have a team 2 minutes out, they'll... The video feed changed. Now it showed the interior of her mother's living room. Her mother, her 2 sisters, her young nieces and nephews, all gathered together, surrounded by armed men. And standing in the center, holding a phone and smiling directly at the camera, was someone Janet recognized from the earlier videos. One of Yuna's lieutenants. Tell Park Minho, the man said in English, clearly meant for this moment, that the game has changed. We're not meeting at Namsan Tower. We're meeting at the old Incheon shipyard. 1 hour, he brings his wife, he comes alone, any sign of his forces, and we start sending pieces of her family to her one at a time, starting with the children. The feed cut to black. Janet couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Her family, her mother, her baby nieces, in the hands of monsters because she'd fallen in love with the wrong man. Janet. Minho's hands were on her shoulders, steady and warm. Look at me. Look at me. She met his eyes, saw the same terror she felt reflected back at her, but underneath it something else. Calculation. Planning. The mind of a man who'd been navigating impossible situations for a decade. My team is already moving, he said. They won't reach your family before we have to leave, but they'll be in position, ready to strike the moment I give the order. They said come alone, Janet whispered. And we will, Minho replied. Alone into the shipyard. But that doesn't mean we'll be unsupported. I have drones, satellite surveillance, and 40 of my best people surrounding the perimeter. The moment your family is clear, we end this. And if they are not clear, Janet asked, the question tasting like ash. If we have to choose between my family and winning, Minho's jaw tightened, then we choose your family. Always. I don't care what it costs me, Janet. I don't care if I lose everything I've built. Your family walks out of this alive. Janet pulled him close, pressing her forehead against his. I love you, she whispered, and I'm sorry I ever doubted that you loved me. Don't apologize, Minho said fiercely. I'm the one who's sorry, for the distance, for the fear, for dragging you into this nightmare, but we're going to end it tonight. Together. He pulled back and moved to the weapons wall, selecting items with practiced efficiency. Can you shoot? You taught me, remember? Janet said, finding her spine, finding that core of Nigerian steel that had gotten her through medical school and 3 years of isolation. What's the plan? Real quick, if this story has you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think is about to happen. Your engagement literally determines if I make part 4, so show some love. Now, back to the story. The Incheon shipyard looked like something from an apocalyptic nightmare. Rusted shipping containers stacked like tombstones, skeletal crane structures reaching toward the night sky like the bones of dead giants. The whole place smelled of salt and decay and old blood. The perfect place for violence. Minho's car pulled up to the main gate exactly 58 minutes after the ultimatum. He was driving a simple black sedan, no armor, no backup visible, just him in a tailored black suit and Janet beside him in tactical black, both looking like they were heading to a funeral. Their funeral, possibly. Cameras in your jewelry, Minho murmured as he parked, gesturing to the delicate necklace he'd fastened around her neck earlier. Transmitting everything to my team. They're watching, waiting. And your family in Lagos? Janet asked. Team is in position, Minho replied, checking his phone one last time. 3 minutes out from breach. But we need to buy them time. They exited the vehicle. The night air was cold, carrying the scent of ocean and rust. Ahead, in the cleared space between shipping containers, lights had been set up, bright, harsh, illuminating a scene that made Janet's blood run cold. Yuna stood center stage wearing that same blood-red dress, her scar prominent in the harsh lighting. But she wasn't alone. Surrounding her were at least 40 armed men, and behind her, displayed on a massive screen jury-rigged between containers, was live footage of Janet's family in Lagos, still surrounded, still hostages. "Park Minho," Yuna called out, her voice carrying across the shipyard. "And the woman who replaced me. How romantic. How absolutely perfect." Minho and Janet walked forward, hands linked, presenting a united front. As they entered the pool of light, Janet got her first real look at Yuna up close. The scar was worse in person, a jagged line that spoke of genuine trauma. But it was her eyes that held Janet's attention. They weren't the eyes of a madwoman. They were the eyes of someone in pain, someone performing a role they'd been forced into. "You're not here by choice," Janet said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Are you?" Yuna's expression flickered, just for a moment. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition that someone finally saw the truth. "Shut up," Yuna said, but there was no heat in it. "You don't know anything about me." "I know your father is Choi Jin-sang," Janet continued, ignoring Minho's warning hand on her arm. "I know he raised you to be a weapon aimed at Minho. I know he faked your death after torturing you just enough to make it convincing, and I know," she took a step forward, "that the woman standing in front of me is just as much a prisoner as I was in that mansion." The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the ocean in the distance, the creak of metal, the breathing of 40 armed men waiting for someone to give an order. "You think you understand," Yuna said quietly, her scarred hand unconsciously touching her face. "You think, because you read some files, watched some videos, that you understand what it's like to be me?" "No," Janet said honestly. "I don't. But I understand what it's like to be trapped, to perform a role because you think it's the only way to survive, to push away the people you love because you're terrified of what loving them might cost." She glanced at Minho. "He did that for 3 years, pushed me away to keep me safe. It didn't work. It just made us both miserable. And you," she looked back at Yuna, "you're doing the same thing right now, performing for your father, becoming the monster he raised you to be. But is that really what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter," Yuna said, and for the first time her voice cracked. "What I want has never mattered." "Then make it matter," Janet challenged. "Right now, this moment. You have 40 guns, you have my family as hostages, you have all the power. So what do you want, Yuna? Not your father. You." Yuna stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, impossibly, she started to laugh. It was a broken sound, half sob, half genuine amusement. "You're insane," she said. "Absolutely insane. I threatened to kill your family and you're trying to therapize me?" "I'm Nigerian," Janet said with a slight smile. "We don't do subtle, and I'm a doctor. I recognize trauma when I see it. You're not the villain here, Yuna. You're a victim who's been forced to play the villain so long you've forgotten there's a difference." Something shifted in Yuna's expression. Her hand moved to her pocket, pulling out a phone. She held it up, showing the screen to Janet and Minho. It was a video call. And on the other end was an older man Janet recognized from the files, Choi Jin-sang, Yuna's father. "Touching speech," Choi's voice came through the speaker, cold and amused. "But ultimately pointless. Yuna, darling, kill the wife. Let's not waste any more time." Yuna's hand trembled, She was holding a gun now. Janet hadn't even seen her draw it. The barrel was pointed directly at Janet's heart. 40 other weapons tracked the movement, ready to fire the moment Yuna gave the signal. "Do it," Choi commanded. "Kill her, and we can finally destroy Park Min-ho the way we've been planning. Kill her, and I'll let you come home. Kill her, and maybe, finally, I'll tell you I'm proud of you." Janet watched Yuna's face, saw the war happening behind her eyes, years of conditioning versus one moment of choice, the woman she'd been forced to become versus the woman she might have been if she'd been allowed to choose. "I'm sorry," Yuna whispered, and Janet couldn't tell if she was apologizing to her or to Min-ho or to herself. "I'm so sorry." Her finger tightened on the trigger. That's when Min-ho moved. He was fast. Faster than Janet had ever seen him move. He stepped in front of her, putting his body between her and the gun, his hands raised in a gesture that was part surrender, part plea. "Don't," he said quietly. "Please, Yuna. Don't do this." "Get out of the way," Yuna said. But her voice was shaking now, the gun wavering. "I can't," Min-ho replied. "You want to kill someone to prove yourself to your father? Kill me. I'm the one he really wants dead anyway. I'm the one you were sent to destroy. So do it. Pull the trigger. But you don't touch her." "Min-ho, no!" Janet tried to pull him back, but he was immovable. "She's innocent in this," Min-ho continued, his eyes locked on Yuna. "Whatever happened between us, whatever pain your father caused, Janet had nothing to do with it. She's just a doctor from Lagos who had the misfortune of being in the wrong alley at the wrong time. You want revenge? Take it from me, but let her go." Yuna's gun was shaking so badly now she could barely hold it. "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face mixing with the scar tissue. "If I don't do this, he'll kill me. He'll kill everyone. This isn't a choice, Min-ho. It never was a choice." "It's always a choice," Min-ho said gently. "Even when it feels impossible, even when every option seems like death. You can choose to be more than what he made you." "How?" Yuna demanded, her voice breaking. "How do I choose anything when he controls everything?" "By choosing right now," Janet said, stepping out from behind Min-ho despite his protest. "By lowering that gun, by telling him no, by taking the first step toward freedom even if you can't see where it leads." The phone in Yuna's other hand was still broadcasting. Choi's voice came through, sharp and commanding. "Yuna, I'm giving you one last chance. Kill them both. Now. Or I will make you suffer in ways that will make the last 3 years look like mercy." Yuna looked at the phone, then at Min-ho, then at Janet, and slowly, impossibly, she lowered the gun. "No," she said quietly. "I'm done." The shipyard exploded into chaos. Choi's voice screamed through the phone. "Kill them! Everyone, kill them now!" But before any of the 40 armed men could fire, something impossible happened. Half of them turned their weapons on the other half. Gunfire erupted not toward Min-ho and Janet, but between the two factions of Yuna's supposed army. "What?" Yuna spun, confusion written across her face. Min-ho allowed himself a small, cold smile. "You're not the only one who can plant people, Choi," he said toward the phone. 20 of those men work for me. Have for months. Did you really think I wouldn't be preparing for this moment since the day I discovered Yuna was alive?" The battle was brutal but brief. Min-ho's planted operatives had the element of surprise, and within 90 seconds the legitimate threats were neutralized. The shipyard fell silent except for groaning injured and the sound of the ocean. Yuna stood in the center of it all, looking lost and confused and somehow smaller without her army behind her. The phone in her hand was still broadcasting Choi's rage, his threats, his promises of what he would do to her for this betrayal. Janet walked up to her slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "Give me the phone," she said gently. Yuna looked at her with hollow eyes. Then, slowly, she handed it over. Janet looked into the camera, at the face of the man who'd orchestrated so much pain, and smiled. "Mr. Choi," she said pleasantly. I'm Janet Park. You've been using my family as leverage. That ends now. She pulled up her own phone, showing him a split screen. On one side, his location. She recognized the office from intelligence photos Minho had shown her. On the other side, a live feed from Lagos showing Korean tactical team bursting into her mother's house, neutralizing Choi's men, her family emerging safe and unharmed. Your men in Lagos are neutralized, Janet continued. Your operation here is destroyed. Your daughter is no longer your weapon. And as for you, she smiled wider. Seoul police are approximately 90 seconds from breaching your office. Minho's been building a case against you for 3 years. Human trafficking, child exploitation, murder, international criminal conspiracy. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Choi's face went pale, then purple with rage. You think this is over? He snarled. You think I don't have contingencies? I will destroy everything you love, Park Minho. I will make you watch your world burn. You can try, Minho said, stepping beside Janet, his arm wrapping around her waist. But here's the difference between you and me, Choi. You use fear as a weapon. You build empires on suffering. You turn your own daughter into a tool for your ambitions. But me? His expression went cold. I build loyalty. I protect my people. And they protect me. As if on cue, the sounds of police sirens came through Choi's phone. His feed showed armed officers bursting into his office. The last thing they saw was Choi reaching for a weapon before the feed cut to black. Silence fell over the shipyard. Yuna had collapsed to her knees, the weight of freedom too much to bear after years of being controlled. She was sobbing, great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. Janet knelt beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. It's over, she said gently. You're free. Free to what? Yuna asked bitterly through her tears. I have nothing. No family, no purpose. Everything I am was designed to destroy him. She gestured toward Minho. What am I supposed to do now? You heal, Janet said simply. You figure out who Yuna is when she's not being controlled. You build a life that's yours. And if you want, she glanced at Minho, who nodded slightly, we help you do that. Yuna looked up at her with disbelief. Why would you help me? I tried to kill you, multiple times. Because you're a victim, Janet said. Just like I was a victim of Minho's fear. Just like he's a victim of his guilt. We're all survivors of trauma trying to figure out how to live with it. And nobody should have to do that alone. Yuna stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Minho's phone buzzed. He checked it, and relief flooded his features. Your family is secure in Lagos, unharmed. My team is flying them to a safe house in Abuja until we confirm there are no remaining threats. Janet felt the tension she'd been carrying finally release. Her family was safe. The nightmare was over. Except it wasn't, because in that moment of relief none of them noticed the figure moving in the shadows of the shipping containers. None of them saw the glint of metal catching the harsh lights. None of them realized that Choi Jin-sung's contingency plan wasn't a manhunt or a vendetta or a legal battle. It was a single loyal operative with a sniper rifle and a suicide mission. The shot rang out across the shipyard. Time seemed to slow. Janet saw Minho's expression change from relief to horror. She saw him turn, reaching for his weapon. She saw Yuna's eyes go wide. And then Janet felt the impact. Not the bullet. She was never the target. But the force of someone slamming into her, tackling her to the ground, shielding her with their body. The bullet that had been meant for Janet's head struck Yuna in the back instead. They hit the ground hard, Yuna's weight on top of Janet, blood already spreading across that red dress, making it impossible to tell where fabric ended and wound began. Around them, Minho's people were already returning fire, already neutralizing the sniper, already securing the perimeter. But Janet's entire focus was on the woman dying in her arms. Yuna! she gasped, her medical training kicking in, her hands already applying pressure to the wound. Yuna, stay with me. Don't you dare die on me now. Yuna coughed, blood flecking her lips, but she was smiling. Actually smiling. Funny, she whispered. I spent 3 years planning to kill you, and here I am, saving your life. Don't talk, Janet commanded, looking around desperately. Minho, I need medical supplies now. We need to get her to a hospital. No hospitals? Yuna interrupted weakly. Too many questions, too much explaining. Minho was already beside them, his jacket off, helping Janet apply pressure, his tattooed hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. There's a medical facility 20 minutes from here. Private, equipped for this. Can you keep her alive that long? I have to, Janet said fiercely. She doesn't get to sacrifice herself for me and then die. That's not how this ends. Yuna's hand found Janet's gripping weakly. Why? She whispered. Why do you care? I'm the villain in your story. No, Janet said, tears streaming down her face. You're not. You never were. You're the victim who became the survivor, and survivors stick together. Yuna's eyes were starting to flutter closed. Tell Minho, she whispered. Tell him I'm sorry. For everything, tell him I really did love him once, before my father ruined it. You tell him yourself, Janet demanded. You stay alive and you tell him yourself. You hear me, Yuna? You don't get to run away from healing by dying. You stay alive, you fight, you survive this. But Yuna's eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow, her pulse thready under Janet's fingers. We need to move, Minho said urgently. Now, my car. They lifted Yuna together, Janet maintaining pressure on the wound, Minho carrying most of her weight. The 20-minute drive to the private facility felt like 20 hours. Janet stayed in the back seat with Yuna, talking to her the entire time, refusing to let her slip away, using every piece of medical knowledge she had to keep blood in her veins and air in her lungs. They burst through the doors of the facility, really a front for Minho's organization, staffed by doctors who didn't ask questions, and immediately Yuna was swept away into surgery. Janet stood in the hallway covered in blood, shaking with adrenaline crash, and finally let herself fall apart. Minho caught her, held her, let her sob against his chest while his tattooed hands stroked her hair. She saved me, Janet whispered. The woman who was sent to kill me saved my life. People are complicated, Minho said quietly. Good people do terrible things. Terrible people do good things. The world isn't as simple as we want it to be. They waited. Hours passed. The sun started to rise outside the facility windows, painting Seoul in shades of pink and gold. The city waking up, unaware that in a private facility on its outskirts, 3 lives hung in the balance. Finally, a surgeon emerged, exhausted but smiling. She's alive, he said, critical but stable. The next 72 hours will tell us if she makes it, but she's a fighter. She's got a chance. Janet felt her knees go weak with relief. Minho caught her again, and they stood there together holding each other up, 2 people who'd been through hell and somehow found their way back. It's over, Minho whispered. It's finally over. Is it? Janet asked. Because she'd learned enough about his world to know that nothing was ever really over. There was always another threat, another enemy, another nightmare waiting in the shadows. But Minho smiled, actually smiled and kissed her forehead. The immediate threat is neutralized. Choi Jin-sang is in custody. His organization is dismantled. Your family is safe. Yuna is alive. For right now, in this moment, we won. What happens now? Janet asked. Now? Minho pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes soft with love and exhaustion. Now we go home. We sleep. We heal. And then we figure out how to actually have a marriage instead of a war. I'd like that, Janet said. They were about to leave when Janet's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her look at the screen. It was a photo message. A single image that made her blood run cold. The photo showed a man she'd never seen before. Western, maybe European, expensive suit, cold, calculating eyes. He was holding a newspaper, today's newspaper, she could see the date. And, behind him, displayed on multiple monitors, were surveillance photos. Of Janet and Minho, of their mansion, of her family in Lagos, of the private facility they were standing in right now. Below the photo was a single line of text. Choi Jin-sang was the appetizer. I'm the main course. See you soon, Mrs. Park. The architect. Janet's hand shook as she showed the phone to Minho. She watched his face go from exhausted relief to something cold and dangerous. Who is that? She whispered. Minho's jaw clenched. That, he said quietly, is the man Choi Jin-sang worked for, the man at the top of the pyramid, the man who's been pulling strings across Asia for 20 years without anyone knowing his real identity. And he's coming for us, Janet finished. He's already here, Minho corrected, looking around the facility with new paranoid eyes. He's been here the whole time, watching, waiting, probably orchestrated this entire thing just to see how we'd react. Another message came through. Just 3 words this time. Game on, darlings. Janet looked at Minho and he looked at her, and they both understood in that moment that the war they'd thought was ending had only just begun. That Yuna and her father had been pawns in a much larger game, that the real enemy was someone they'd never even considered, someone who knew everything about them, someone who'd been watching them for God knows how long, someone who played chess with human lives and had just declared checkmate was coming. What do we do? Janet asked, though she already knew the answer. Minho pulled her close, his tattooed hands framing her face, and kissed her deeply. When he pulled back, his eyes held that dangerous glint she'd first seen in the alley 3 years ago. The glint that said he was done playing defense and ready to go on the attack. We do what we always do, he said. We fight. Together. And we show this architect that he made a fatal mistake targeting the wrong couple. Together, Janet agreed. But as they walked out of that facility into the rising sun, both of them knew that this time would be different. This time, they weren't fighting an enemy they understood. They were fighting a ghost, a puppet master, someone who'd been orchestrating their lives possibly longer than they'd known each other. And the scariest part? They had no idea who he really was, what he wanted, or how to stop him. The game was on, and this time the stakes weren't just their lives or their love or their family. This time the stakes were the entire underworld of Asia. And somewhere in Seoul, in a penthouse they couldn't find, watching through cameras they didn't know existed, the architect smiled and began moving his next piece into position. If this story has you dying for part 4, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Drop a comment telling me who you think the architect is and what his real endgame might be. Is he someone from Minho's past? Is he connected to Janet's life in Lagos? Or is he something entirely unexpected? Share this video with someone who loves intense romance mixed with thriller vibes. And get ready, because part 4 is going to blow your mind in ways you're not ready for. Trust me on this one. I'll see you in the comments. Now go theorize. Who is the architect?